What's going on, everybody? My name is C4. Welcome back to the channel. It's time for another way too early NFL mock draft. We're done the first month of the regular season, first month or so of college football. So we're starting to get an idea of what teams are pretty bad and what prospects are pretty good. I think overall the reputation for this 2025 NFL draft is not a crazy amount of bona fide blue chip first rounders, but there's still lots of value. And given the current order of the draft, I think we're going to have lots of fun. So without further ado, the Jacksonville Jaguars are on the clock. Starting things out with the Jags roster, looking at where they're weak. I mean, the big question comes at quarterback. Are the Jags content with Trevor Lawrence? I don't think they end up with the first overall pick. And I think it's very clear, we're writing on the wall, that they would commit to Trevor Lawrence with a different coach, a different approach over Doug Peterson and Press Taylor, as it looks like Doug's going to get fired again because of his reluctancy to get rid of Press Taylor again at 2 stops. What does Press Taylor have over Doug Peterson? I do not know. But when you look at the Jags, I do think secondary is a big position in need. I think they also could try to improve the interior of the D-line. But given this spot, let's have a little bit of fun. I don't think he's the best corner in the nation. I think Will Johnson is the best corner, but I think the versatility, I think Tony Khan, the Khans, they understand the marketability that you would get by selecting none other than Travis Hunter first overall. The versatility, you could, honestly, rumors are they might trade Christian Kirk. So if you decide to trade that, you'll free up a spot at wide receiver. But ultimately, you get a generational athlete. Is Travis Hunter going to go first overall? Highly unlikely. But I think there is such a severe lack of blue chip players, and understanding that marketing is a side that goes into this, I could see it happening. So Travis Hunter first in the Jacksonville Jaguars. His versatility is huge. Tennessee at pick number 2, and I think if Tennessee is at this spot, it is very much meaning the end of the Will Levis era. And I think you take a swing at quarterbacks. And my hot take on the quarterbacks this year, not a good year, I don't think, to be wanting a quarterback. I'm not a believer in Carson Beck. I think he's the kind of guy that you get in like a Will Levis range, where, you know, second round, somewhere in that range, developmental options, see what happens. But he doesn't even have half the arm talent that Will Levis had. And I think if you move off that, you can go Shedeur. Would Coach Prime be cool with Shedeur going to Tennessee? Not the best landing spot for the kid. You got Cam Ward, you got Quinn Ewers, you got Jalen Monroe. I like Quinn Ewers, but I mean, he might not even be the starter at Texas anymore with the way that Arch Manning is playing. I do think he probably gives you the best shot if Texas wants to go in a little bit drunk because he brings that experience in. So I will say for right now, Quinn Ewers, I will have go pick 2. I do have Shedeur as my top quarterback this year, but I don't think it's a particularly strong quarterback class. I don't think any of these quarterbacks are top 10 players in this class. I think there's talent. I think Quinn Ewers could definitely develop into a franchise guy. Shedeur could. Cam Ward has tools. Jalen Monroe, outstanding set of tools. Kind of with like an Anthony Richardson approach. Carson Beck could definitely still kind of be a guy. But this is not a year that I think you want a quarterback. But out of all of them, Quinn Ewers, especially if he comes back, takes over that Texas job, has them run the SEC, goes on a playoff run, plays the way he was playing before he got hurt. I think out of all the options, a potential first quarterback with the off-field stuff with Shedeur, I think Quinn Ewers has the best shot. New England at pick 3. This is an easy selection. Their offensive line is absolutely terrible. So we're going to have them select Will Campbell so they can, going into year 2, finally just be like, yeah, we can play Drake May now because our offensive line won't get him killed. Next up, we have the Cincinnati Bengals at pick 4. Another team, much like the Jags, I don't think they're going to be picking tough. I mean, maybe the Jags will. They've been look pretty bad. The Bengals are an interesting one, and I kind of agree with this site. Edge and wide receiver is where I would consider. Wide receiver, a lot of uncertainty. Jamar Chase has yet to get paid. Probably not going to be T. Higgins. So they have other guys, Burton, Yoshivas, that could potentially step up. But when you're looking at the board here, McMillan, 6'5", like there's a plug-and-play replacement for T. Higgins. Luther Burden, in terms of blue chip talent, blue chip wide receiver right there as well. You look at the edge rush help. James Pierce is a dog. I would honestly have James Pierce as my 3rd right now as it stands. I like Mikael Williams, elite length for the position. Abdul Carter, S-tier athlete. But all 3 of those guys also could fit the bill for an aging pass rush. As Trey Hendrickson's not getting any younger. Sam Hubbard's kind of at a limited ceiling. I think, honestly, this would be one of those off seasons where like there's going to be a lot of uncertainty for Cincinnati at the wide receiver spot, so they kind of come out of nowhere. And looking at the style, I'm going to have them go with McMillan, especially if McMillan can test well. Ridiculous playmaker. And again, that is a like-for-like T. Higgins replacement. Keep that wide receiver room rolling. Cleveland up at pick 5. And I'd assume at this point, they'd be like, all right, we're ready. We're ready to move on from Deshaun Watson. And again, you need to enter into the discussion of whether or not is this going to turn into another Eli Manning Chargers trade me to the Giants situation? But I think if I'm Cleveland here at pick 5, this is the board. It is time to select Shedeur Sanders. Shedeur Sanders might not have the best pure arm talent in the draft, but I think from an accuracy standpoint, I think from a pocket presence standpoint, I think it would be very fun to see him behind a great offensive line, which that is ideally what he would get in Cleveland. Cleveland has had, for the most part, a consistent offense, maybe a little bit down this year, but generally speaking, it's a franchise that likes to protect their quarterback when they can. It's a priority, and that is something that I would like to see with Shedeur. You get veteran wide receivers, assuming Amari Cooper doesn't bounce. That'd be a great 1-2 punch. Maybe go get another game changer out there. Njoku's a great tight end. You get back Nick Chubb, who is he? Are they going to extend him? Is he going to be there long term? But either way, I think that would be an interesting land. Not the worst landing spot for Shedeur Sanders, all things considered. Carolina at 6. I don't think they'd give up on Bryce Young yet. I still think they're going to view it as we didn't redshirt Bryce Young soon enough, but we can kind of do that right now with Andy Dalton. And with that being said, best player on the board, they go get a blue chip player in Will Johnson, corner from Michigan. As prototypical first-round blue chip corners you're going to find. 6'2", 6'3", he's probably going to run a 4.3, ball hawk ability, high IQ player. You have him on one side, J.C. Horn on the other, the Horn Dog. That's going to be a very good secondary. Safe pick. Rams at 7. Never too early to view the quarterback position because now you would have red shirts. Now you can look at Beck, Ward, Jalen Milroe, and be like, well, we got Stafford for another year. Those guys, and I would say for Milroe's case, that would be very interesting, especially if McVay can kind of fall in love there. But ultimately, you're looking for weapons. And kind of looking at the board here, corner, wide receiver, Ben Morrison's a dog, Denzel Burke's a dog. But I would say, what do we have left at a Cooper Kupp? What do you have in Puka Nacua, who slipped in the draft due to injury? Now he's getting hurt again. Are you going to gamble that they're going to stay healthy and not address the wide receiver, even if Luther Burden is the top available player? It's a discussion to be had. But I think looking at the Rams roster, the most plug-and-play fit at this spot, you got Mason Graham, still on the board. There's going to be a little bit of a hot take. I think Mason Graham, nose tackles are not drafted particularly high for a reason. I'm going Dayon Walker from Kentucky. 6'7", 345 pounds, built like Jordan Davis, Bruce Feldman's freak list, but he can rush the passer. Unlike Jordan Davis, has some pass rush moves. I think you get a plug-and-play nose tackle. You got Fisk on one side, Kobe Turner on the other, Walker or Graham, either one, depending on how you feel about them. I think nose tackle and really beefing up that D-line really offers the best value for the Rams right there at pick 7. Because you could go wide receiver, but I do think you still gamble that Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua can stay healthy. Could go offensive tackle. Kelvin Banks is there if you want to protect. That would be maybe the other spot I would pivot if we're not going nose tackle, which nose tackle top 10 picks, a little faux pas. I think you could look at Malachi Starks at safety. Could be an interesting fit. I don't know if they would love a corner here at 7 with how the board is fall. Could go pass rush, edge rush, but Byron Young, Jared Verse, Braden Fisk. I mean, they've done a lot for that pass rush. I think Abdul Carter would be great value, but ultimately we'll go Walker, go the high-tier, high-ceiling athlete out of Kentucky. Going on to the Cardinals, luxury pick. I'm going Luther Burden at wide receiver. You went out and got Marvin Harrison. Go get Debo. That's been a comp for years. You get a gadget-type wide receiver, he's the next Debo. Burden's the closest thing we've seen to Debo Samuel when Debo Samuel was coming out of South Carolina. The closest thing. Insane yak, great playmaker, double team, triple team like he's been the last 2 years. Doesn't matter. He still gets it. I think for the Cardinals, you either go there or you look at Kelvin Banks at tackle and see if they can get a right tackle out of it to pair with Paris Johnson. But I think all in all, offense is where the Cardinals need to continue to maximize as much value as they can get out of Kyler Murray and Luther Burden and Marvin Harrison Jr. You got Michael Wilson, nice little gadget player, nice little player as well. Get all the weapons to maximize Kyler Murray's value. That's kind of where I'd view this, especially if they finish with a top 10 pick. Now we have the New York Giants at pick number 9, and as a team that Obviously not a fan of. Have no problem saying, you know what, let's give them Carson Beck. That's a great landing spot. Do I view Carson Beck as a first rounder? I do not. Do people smarter than me in scouting consider him a first round? They do. And assuming that this is the final spot here for the New York Giants, things did not turn around with Daniel Jones, who, I'll be honest, hasn't looked brutal to start this year. Definitely helps having a Malik Neighbors out there. But another poor finish would likely signal the end of the Daniel Jones era. And if you're looking at those quarterbacks, maybe more so a quarterback that would fit within a Brian Dable offense, not going with another project like Daniel Jones, which is what you would get ideally in a Milrow. I think you would be considering Beck and Cam Ward at this position, and we'll go with Beck with maybe a little bit higher floor than Cam Ward. Next up, we got the Miami Dolphins at pick 10. Interesting spot. There's a lot of value there. D-line is a need, but for my money, I think left tackle. I think Terran Armstead's kind of the last year of his contract, so we're going to go out and get Kelvin Banks, a franchise tackle from the University of Texas. I think they've got some pretty decent play from the other side. The dude they got from USC, Austin Jackson's kind of panned out a little bit, but they did take a hit on the O-line. Terran Armstead just can't stay healthy. So whether it's Tua, whether it's someone else at quarterback long-term, protecting the quarterback has been an issue for the Miami Dolphins. So investing on the offensive line, I think, would be a safe pick at pick 10. Next up, we have the Indianapolis Colts, and BPA, debatably, on the board still, could fall to the two position needs. I like Ben Morris in the corner out of Notre Dame. I like Mason Graham, the D lineman. I think both of those make a lot of sense. I would say ultimately we'll build in the trenches. We'll go with maybe the higher overall player on the board, Mason Graham at pick 11. I think with the Chargers up next on the clock, makes a lot of sense to go best player available on the defensive line. I don't want to necessarily continue to go with the spicy take, but I think if I'm a Harbaugh, Michael Williams out of Georgia would be the edge rusher. I think is a slightly better scheme fit. And I think you got Khalil Mack getting older, Joey Bosa's getting older. Really that defensive front, maybe they were hoping that they could grab Mason Graham, even though, last year we saw Harbaugh's not one to overreach and grab his Michigan boys. Blake Corum was there multiple times. Thought that was a lock to end up going to the Chargers. Not necessarily the case, but I think pick a litter. James Pierce and or Williams would be an outstanding fit for that defense for the Chargers at pick 12. Pick 13, we got the New Orleans Saints. They need edge rush help, and they're going, yes, sir, we will very gladly take James Pierce. He's not having the best year, best start at Tennessee, but he's one of those guys, you look at his tape the last 2 years, and I imagine he's going to test very, very well come the offseason. Everyone's going to go, oh, yeah, that is definitely a top 15 pick at edge rush. This is going to be a very annoying pick. So we get Dallas up at pick 14. Running back is definitely a need for them, but even with how good G.T. is, I have a hard time saying he's going to go pick 14. Even though it's just, you have to be the perfect situation. Like, I think for a running back to go in the first round nowadays, it has to be a G.T. type, and the team that desperate for running back is like picking like mid-20s, late 20s. I don't think you're getting a running back. I mean, they could, though. This could be a Jerry Jones pick. Sick and disgusted about the lack of run game. I, however, think a more pressing concern, more value concern, is Tank Lawrence. Tank Lawrence, another injury, struggles to stay healthy. Is that a player that's on his way out in Dallas? Because if that is the case, you can get a kind of Micah Parsons type. And it's not just because they both go to Penn State. Abdul Carter started as an inside linebacker, off-ball linebacker, and they're like, oh, this guy's a freak athlete. Let's just move him to edge rush. And I would absolutely hate this pick because there is a very high ceiling there. The same ceiling, I mean, there's no more Dan Quinn to develop, but I think for me, looking at the Cowboys roster, I'd be more concerned about finding a Tank Lawrence successor than I would be, overdrafting G.T., even though he's an electrifying running back. Now, for the Chicago Bears, I don't want this to necessarily come off as like a lazy pick. Just go best lineman available. And for my money, that is Emory Jones, the tackle from LSU. The O-line situation is brutal there. And I don't know with that selection, if you move a couple pieces around, is Darnell Wright going to be like kind of Trey Smith was when he came out of Tennessee? Trey Smith was a tackle, but moved inside the guard. Haven't looked back for the Kansas City Chiefs. Is that necessarily the case with Darnell Wright? Move some pieces around, but you got to improve. The O-line, when I watch Chicago play, is absolutely horrific. So I think, Irsay, great run blocker, maybe the best run blocker in the class. He could go Savina here, Savainia, probably butchering that, but he's a tackle that would probably kick inside if he moves to the next level. But I think we just go play it safe, pick 15 for Chicago, continue to build up that O-line, acquire assets, and then find the best 5 in training camp. Green Bay at pick 16, we're going to go with my highest player available, and that is Ben Morrison. Not quite Will Johnson level, but still prototypical height, weight, speed on the outside at corner. I've been calling it for the last year or two. I don't want to put this bad voodoo on you Packer fans watching. I feel like they're going to do what they did to Aaron Rodgers to Jair Alexander. I feel like there's just a disconnect between the front office and ownership. The player like that, even if everything's smooth sailing and I'm making something out of nothing. I think finding another Stokes experiment has not necessarily worked out. I think going back to the well in the first round to try to shore up that secondary would be well advised, because the offense, especially when that offense can get rolling, they're finding ways to get role players on the offensive line to play at a high level. Run game, you're probably not getting exactly what you want out of Josh Jacobs, but you know the talent's there. Wide receiver there, as deep as any team in the nation. You know Jordan Love should continue to elevate his play. He's not at his ceiling. So I look on the defense, and it screams secondary pick at 16 for Green Bay. Next up, we got the Baltimore Ravens at 17, and we're going to go with Savainya. Probably butchering that, but interior offensive line is the biggest need for the Baltimore Ravens. I think you could maybe move Makari back inside the guard. You have Linderbaum at center. You got Stanley. Still, obviously, you project him to remain your tackle. Rosengarten, I think you might be able to go at right tackle, but that left guard spot, one of those guard spots is still kind of the glaring weakness. They took a big hit last offseason in terms of, keeping and retaining some of their offensive linemen, and I would continue to always invest to keep and let Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry show keep going, and that would be going with a guard at pick 17. I think the same can be said for the Niners, building in the trenches. Ursary at tackle. I think we could potentially be seeing the end of the Trent Williams era. If not, it's never too early to consider his successor. Ursay, one of the best run blockers in all of college football. Absolute plug-and-play fit in a Shanahan offense. And now, my beloved Eagles. The big issue for the Philadelphia Eagles is pass rush. Now, the board is not my favorite. I think if the Jordan Davis experience is over, Tyleik Williams, Ohio State, would make some sense here. I think when you look at edge rushers, you almost need to throw in Harold Perkins. And Harold Perkins and Jalen Walker are two guys that, obviously with Perkins with the ACL, could, again, it's an interesting spot. And I think the way that I view this is looking at the board, who could come in and help the pass rush right away. And I look at who's available, Landon Jackson could be a first rounder. Just off the page there. Jack Sawyer, for Gator reasons, I won't even talk about you. Tui Maliau, but I think Scouton, the Purdue transfer to Texas A&M, I think it's 3 sacks in 5 games. Unique body type. And I always view this as, we know it's Brandon Graham's last hurrah, but Brandon Graham, the build that BG has, you get a little bit of that in Scouton. So we're going to go with the best available pass rush, because even though Philly's going into a bye right now, I personally don't know if I see the end of the tunnel for how we fix this pass rush. So let's continue to throw resources at it. Go to the New York Jets. I actually think this is a very interesting landing spot to get a developmental quarterback, which is why I'm going to have them draft Jalen Milroe. Let's go with a traits-based quarterback that could sit behind Aaron Rodgers for a season. Jalen Milroe has undeniable first-round quarterback traits. It's between the ears. It's the consistency, the pocket presence, the accuracy that is going to need a lot of development. I think 1 year with Rodgers, who has the experience with Jordan Love, I think it would obviously be a different environment than when they drafted Jordan Love, when Rodgers was still kind of like near the end of his prime. But I think it's never too late to consider a quarterback option. And I think of the developmental guys, Drew Aller could be viewed a developmental guy. Above all, I think the traits that you have, the undeniable traits with Milroe, if you can get a little Aaron Rodgers influence there, special player. The QBs just fly out the board. I do think I've seen enough out of Cam Ward to go like, yeah, is he a first rounder in my view? Some of these quarterbacks are. I don't know necessarily I could say Milroe's a first rounder, but if like Bo Nix and Michael Penix are going first round, these guys are first rounders, and Vegas finds themselves hopefully a new franchise quarterback, because things don't look great on that front there. We have Denver, and this is honestly a run it up to the board if I'm the Denver Broncos. They need wide receiver help, sure, but with Malachi Stark still on the board trying to replace Justin Simmons, there is your like-for-like replacement as they get probably the last, depending on how you view GT, potentially the last blue-chip player of the draft at pick 22. Great value. We'll now have the Atlanta Falcons, and I am going to have them select Tyleik Williams, D lineman from Ohio State. probably, I think the word out right now in recruiting is, Dane Brugler, big time draft guy, even ahead of Tumalao and Sawyer. Williams is a guy that stands out. I feel like for that front three that the Atlanta Falcons have, I think he can play multiple positions on that front. Has a lot of juice as a pass rush, 320 pounds, so not a liability as a run defender as well. And I think it is time for Atlanta to start reinvesting. I mean, Grady Jarrett's not getting any younger. Let's get someone exciting on that front three. I think for Detroit, back on the clock at 24, I do agree. Edge rush, getting that partner in crime with Aiden Hutchinson on one side. I think we could go Tui Maliau, former 5-star recruit. Definitely want to see him pick up the production a little bit for Ohio State. Production's never been his key. That's always a tough sell on a first-rounder that does not have production. That I don't think necessarily Tui Maliau is going to be like an S-tier athlete that lights the combine up. But I do feel like he's a very, very hard-nosed run defender that does have a little bit of pass rush to his game and would ultimately be a very nice compliment on the other side of Aiden Hutchinson, who is this season in particular emerging as an all-world pass rusher. As expected, still cannot believe the Jags drafted Travon Walker over Aiden Hutchinson. Now the Commanders are interesting at pick 25. Could definitely look at some DB help. Denzel Burke, Decario Davis. Ravel did, I believe, tear his ACL, so he's probably going to fall a little bit. Tackle, not in love with the board there. Kind of like looking at, like, what do you go from a BPA? Do they need tight end help? Maybe, but they did just invest in the Kansas State tight end. Do we go luxury pick? Someone like Ginty. As much as we like Brian Robinson, you got Austin Eckler on a rental. I view this as an Eagles fan. Who would be I think Ginty would be incredibly annoying. But I think I'm going to do it. I was going to go with a Canadian wide receiver there. I think as an Eagle fan, I make this mock draft. Who would be the most annoying pick for the Commanders to get there that I would despise? Because Ginty is Eckler. Like, they clearly signed Eckler because Cliff Kingsbury and company want that pass-catching weapon out of the backfield. Ginty is the best receiving running back in college football. On top of the fact that he's also the best running back in college football. And I don't think having a solid, cheap, affordable Brian Robinson puts you off from getting an absolute game changer at that running back spot that not only takes the pressure off your young quarterback, but gives him another weapon in the pass game. Kind of seems like a home run to me. Moving on to the Buffalo Bills, where I think it would be time to address the secondary. And with the board as is, I'm going to put a little bit of SEC bias in the mix. And I'm going to go with Maxwell Hairston. You get production in the SEC. For every Emmanuel Forbes, you get a really good player. And I think that is where Hairston's at right now. Kentucky kind of meh type of season, but they got great players. Deion Walker and Hairston, probably the best of the bunch. Next up, we got the Steelers, and they're looking for DL help. They're looking for wide receiver help. And I think looking at this board, if I was intrigued, I would go with Kenneth. I think Kenneth Grant's had a little bit of a down year, but I think that's kind of universal for Michigan. I think Kenneth Grant, 330 pounds, is going to test very well at the combine. High on, I believe he's actually like the third, top 5 on Bruce Feldman's freaks list. Anytime you get a nose tackle like that, and you got a D-line there in Pittsburgh that wants to continue to get a little bit younger, who knows how many more years Cam Hayward has on that front, go with the big-time athlete. Safe pick. Now here's where I think some team is going to get the luxury. And we got Tampa Bay. Are they going to still be at this spot come season end? I don't know. But someone is going to go, I want Harold Perkins. Even though we're going to have to kind of redshirt him coming off the ACL, he is still in the bubble of a blue-chip player for this year's class. And I think someone like Todd Bowles would be like, yep, we're going to be able to get a player that has like the blitzing that we loved and kind of lost in Devin White. Could develop as a pass rush, just an absolute weapon. And I'd love to see Harold Perkins go to a team with a defensive-minded coach who's going to be able to maximize ability. Don't have him go to another one of these like Isaiah Simmons type weird positionless players that just get put with a terrible DC that squanders their talent. Someone like Todd Bowles would maximize Perkins, and that'd be an absolute luxury selection. Gonna go with a little bit of projection here for the Houston Texans. I look at their roster. I think interior of the D-line is where they need to improve a little bit. Board hasn't necessarily gone their way. You got the Godfather, Corleone, finally getting healthy for Cincinnati. Maybe he could rise up a little bit. But I think you got someone like Walter Nolan. Undersized, interior pass rush help on that D-line. Was a big 5-star. I believe he was like a top 3 player in his recruiting class. So it's still a little bit of a projection. But again, much like Harold Perkins, it's kind of viewed as a luxury pick, but you go to a team with a proven developer, defensive-minded head coach that will be able to get and reach the ceiling on both of those elite players. Next up, we have the Seattle Seahawks. And with this selection, I'm going to have them get Colson Loveland at tight end. I feel like they're just not getting a whole lot out of the tight end position at Noah Fant. They did just draft a tight end in the 4th round. I think it was from Michigan. Double back here again. Loveland is very much, as it stands, a first-round caliber at tight end. Prototypical, complete tight end. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Michael Mayer when he was coming out of Notre Dame. You know, he's not necessarily like a Brock Bowers type, but he does give you that little bit of old-school play. And I think when you look, and this is just kind of trying to find patterns, right? You get Mike McDonald coming from Baltimore. Baltimore always had strong tight end play. Are they getting that right now with Seattle? Don't necessarily know. And with Loveland also arguably being BPA on the board, I love that fit. We're going to finish up. We got the Vikings. We're using the Vikings as our main channel franchise. I know what they're weak at, and it is corner. You don't love the value here at corner right now. If Ravel didn't tear his ACL, you'd probably be like, all right, let's go with the upside. So I would say, Takari Davis not having the hottest of season. One time I watched Arizona play, he got kind of picked on. So we'll go with Denzel Burke. Returned to get a little bit better, improve his draft stock at Ohio State. A lot of people thought he could leave last year. But I do think corner is the biggest area of need for Minnesota. And, not my favorite pick, but kind of like a BPA, a little bit of a reach for a positional need. But it is what it is at this point of the draft. And then, lastly, hopefully this does not happen. I cannot deal with them winning another Super Bowl. We have the Kansas City Chiefs, who are probably very upset that Loveland just went, because that would be a very nice successor for Travis Kelce. But honestly, I kind of feel like this is a simple selection. Says they need D-line help. You're not in love with who's still available, right? I think if you can't get a Kelce success, let's continue to build on the wide receiver room. And I don't know, out of this group, guys, I think there's definitely someone that could get hot, someone that could test very well and become a first-rounder. I love, with all Canadian bias, Ayo Manor from Stanford, ridiculous catch radius. Trey Harris is putting up big-time numbers, the most productive wide receiver in the SEC. But you got to think the veteran experience and what he would bring from a play-now, ready-now standpoint. Ibuka from Ohio State. Player, we got Rashee Rice. Unfortunately, looks like a pretty bad injury. Plus, you got legal issues. You got Xavier Worthy as your deep threat. But for that route runner, I think Ibuka would fit the bill here for the Kansas City Chiefs. And that is a way too early 2025 NFL mock draft at the end of month 1 of NFL being back. Again, I think it's just weird from the draft order standpoint, just how some of these players went. But ultimately, I like a lot of the fits. I'd say don't love my Eagles pick, to be honest with you. If I had to look back on this on fits that ultimately I'm not the biggest fan of, before you guys start to roast me. I mean, Burke there, I don't know if he's a first rounder. Nolan could be a reach of a first rounder. Harold Perkins, I think someone will bite. Kenneth Grant's having a down year, but I think he'll be another one of those guys that improves his draft stock. Tui Maliau, is that the best fit, best value for the Detroit Lions? Even though I do think they need to get another premier pass rusher there. It's Tui Maliau going to be the guy that can develop into that playmaker. The quarterbacks, is Jalen Milroe done enough to go in the first round? Our team's going to be scared of kind of what's going on with Anthony Richardson, and is he going to develop? Is he not? Is his play style sustainable at the next level? Is that going to be the Jalen Milroe case? Because obviously Jalen Milroe 2 years ago, laughing if he was considered a first rounder. But I think you look at the traits that you've seen this year, sitting behind Aaron Rodgers, that is interesting. That's a very interesting landing spot. Kind of just through best lineman available at the Bears. Does that make the most sense with what they have, with the value, with the starters that they do have long term? Don't know. We had James Pierce fall a little bit. Mason Graham. That's a little bit potentially of a reach. Does Deion Walker emerge as the first D lineman selected? Could also be sticking my neck out in the line a little bit too long there. And it's Travis Hunter, the first overall pick. Who knows? Love to hear what you guys' feedback thinks. We'll be back tomorrow. We got all my uploads pretty much in a good spot for the rest of the week. Tomorrow is going to be a new episode of our NC College Football, don't say, College Football 25 Coaching Dynasty, where we get our first head coach job. And then in 2 days' time, we will have another episode of Vikings franchise. We got rebuilds, college and NFL coming as well this week. So lots of good stuff. Stay tuned to the sub box. If it is your first time stopping by, don't be afraid to hit that subscribe button. Smash the like button if you enjoyed. Until next time, with your boy C4 saying peace out. Love ya. Have a good one.